Sonic Mania and Sonic Superstars, two modern day takes on the classic Sonic the Hedgehog formula. One is beloved by all, the other not so much. But is the court of public opinion correct, or is one game overrated while the other game is overhated? This is Dan, the Mega Driver of the Sega guys, and having played both extensively, I'm here to break down both games and tell you which one I think is better in a 3-part mini-series. In this video, I'll be reviewing Sonic Superstars. Is it as bad as people say? Let's take a look. In 2017, Sega released Sonic Mania, a 2D Sonic game created in the vein of the 90s originals, developed in partnership with Christian Whitehead, which ushered in the return of classic Sonic the Hedgehog with regards to the gameplay that made the Mega Drive classic so legendary. Naturally, fans clamoured for a sequel, and discussions between Whitehead and Sega were ongoing, going as far as drawing up concept art, until they decided to part ways in 2021 as Whitehead and his team focused on their own project, Penny's Big Breakaway. Around the same time, Sonic Team head honcho Takashi Iizuka was enjoying a Zoom drinking party with Sonic the Hedgehog creator Naoto Oshima, and the two Sonic veterans agreed to create a new Sonic game together, having not worked on a game in the series together since Sonic Adventure all the way back in 1998. What was abundantly clear following Sonic Mania is that the follow-up would be different, with a modern art style and few, if any, classic zones, something that both Sonic Team and Christian Whitehead agreed before they parted ways. Christian Whitehead would later reveal ideas such as a hand-painted art style and a 2.5D adventure, though neither of those actually came to pass. Instead, with Oshima and Arzest at the helm, we got what is on the face of it a safer classic Sonic outing, one that combines 2D classic Sonic gameplay with modern polygonal visuals. Despite what initially feels unambitious, Superstars actually has several tricks up its sleeve that it uses to differentiate the game from previous entries in the series with varying degrees of success. Let's start with the visuals and presentation, and we start with an animated intro which appears to be done in the vein of Sonic Mania, but kind of feels less energetic to me. It plays like the intro to a Saturday morning cartoon, which is likely what they were trying to achieve. Beyond that, the game's graphics are, well, fine. The modern visuals are clean and sharp on modern hardware, but lack the sort of pizzazz that the series is actually renowned for. They're not bad, just kind of middling without any real distinguishing art style. The characters are expressive and unquestionably Sonic, and the enemies have that cutesy early Sonic feel and feel like they jumped right out of the original Sonic games. The problem is, the characters lack any real flourish, coming across as 90s CG renders rather than, say, Sonic as if he were animated by Pixar. Well, I guess 90s CG renders is kind of a style. If you've ever seen some early Sonic videos or some of the posters in media such as Sonic the Comic, you'll know what I'm talking about. The badniks for the most part have that style about them, and to paraphrase Calvin Harris, it was acceptable in the 90s when there were limits to the tech behind this sort of imagery, but today, it's just lacking excitement. This extends to the stage visuals too. The first zone suits the art style the most with its vibrant Sega blues and summertime vibes, giving warmth and detail to the area. But after that, visually, the levels are a bit of a mixed bag. On the whole, most look just okay. You have some visual highlights such as Cyberstation with its neon pixel look that exhibits some brilliant imagination and allows for some very interesting set pieces. Bridge Island, as we come back to that meanwhile, is a vibrant and clean looking rendition of those classic Sonic opening zones that you remember, with the island views, azure skies and blue seas giving you green and emerald hill zone vibes. Some stages manage to retain this feeling better than others, Pinball Carnival and Speed Jungle do for example. However, some zones just look bland and empty. Golden Capital and Sand Sanctuary are two examples, with the latter really suffering in comparison to the abundance of detail in prior Sonic games. Much of this has to do with the more stylized and abstract design and abundance of colour in classic pixel art versus the clean and somewhat more grounded construction that necessitates polygonal rendering. This means that some zones just look flat and empty, and even ugly at times. The good and the bad kind of balance it out for me, so despite spending several paragraphs dissecting it, there's little more I can say other than it looks fine, I guess. Sound, though, is another area where Superstars has garnered a less than enthusiastic response from the Sonic community, with some claiming PTSD from the infamous Sonic 4 soundtrack. Is it deserved? Despite Sonic Audio veteran and Crush 40 guitar shredder Jun Sunui getting some heat for his contributions, the soundtrack actually boasts a huge cast of music talent from Sega sound team legends such as Jun, Rintaro Soma, Iona Takashima and even Takanobu Mitsuyoshi, as well as contracted chiptune superstars such as Toriana and T. Lopes. The result is a soundtrack that is a little more eclectic than other Sonic games, but remains mostly consistent, not unlike something like Sonic 3 and Knuckles, which also boasted a wealth of composers after moving away from Masato Nakamura, who composed the first two Mega Drive games. There are some cracking tracks as well. T. Lope's Speed Jungle Act 1 is up there with his usual best, while his partnership with Jun Sunui for the Bridge Island tunes plays to both artists' strengths to create tracks that are modern yet evocative of the 16-bit games. Toriana's Egg Fortress is another that I think is absolutely outstanding, but it's a little short. The Pinball Carnival tracks by Sega composer Rintaro Soma are some of my favourites too, especially the Act 2 theme melding the Carnival Night style themes with the Ghost House aesthetic from that area that channels the spirit of Sonic Heroes' Hang Castle. There's many more, such as the bonus stage theme, which again is very Sonic-y with modern instrumentation. Much of the negativity has been around the boss themes, which are all Jun Sunui solo pieces, but I think they're good enough. Once you get around the instrumentation triggering Sonic 4 flashbacks, they do a good job of communicating the mechanical menace of Dr. Robotnik's machines. They may not be up there with the series' best, but they're not bad. Overall, I think the wider perception of Sonic Superstars music is kinda harsh. The game has some great tracks that fit the themes and the design brilliantly. The presentation as a whole takes a bit of a bashing from fans and critics, but it's clear that a lot of effort has been made in fitting everything together. If Superstars has a major failing, it's that the art direction is just so uninspired, so that alone drags everything down with it. A more abstract or stylized art direction would have helped the visuals immensely, and I feel that the accompanying music, as it is, may have been better received as an overall package. But hey, all this stuff is subjective and this is just my opinion. The real meat of this review has to come back to the gameplay and level design. This is almost Sonic as you remember, with a few bells and whistles, albeit some that don't quite suit and drag the experience down a bit, depending how much you lean into them. The basics are there. Sonic handles near perfectly, and the team supposedly not only built on the base of the prior Mania game, but also ran comparisons side by side with the Mega Drive games, even going so far as to build some of the original zones into the Superstars engine to ensure Sonic and Powers all handled just right. It pays dividends, and for the majority of the game, this feels like classic Sonic the Hedgehog as you remember. But the game isn't a formulaic retread of the past games, it does mix things up. One of the refreshing ways it does so is by playing fast and loose with the zone structures. Some have just one act, some have three. Some of those acts require you to play as Sonic, Tails, Knuckles or Amy with their specific abilities coming into the fore. This means that the usual 2-act structure is sidestepped and the journey through the main game mode feels a little bit more fresh. Most zones do have their own mechanics, like the rails and tunnels in Speed Jungle that make it feel like a better designed and more cohesive Stardust Speedway, or Press Factory Act 1 with its hammer that sends shockwaves through the floor and propels your character airborne if you happen to be on the ground at the time. Or there's Cyber Speedway, which sees your character digitised, transformed and sent along power lines. Most of these work really well and keep the experience fresh and interesting, maintaining that classic Sonic feel, all while giving players something new and different, or at the very least uncommon in the series to deal with. In that sense, Superstars is full of surprises throughout its playthrough. Some of the stage gimmicks do gel better with the Sonic gameplay than others. For example, Speed Jungle Act 2 with its dark sections are divisive, and I don't feel they gel that well with Sonic Speed, while that section does actually have its fans. Thematically, the zones tick all the Sonic boxes with enough twists on the formula to prevent them from feeling stale. Meanwhile, the zone gimmicks largely do a good job at feeling like natural extensions of the zone themes. And the act design? Honestly, it's superb, and I'm talking best in the series superb. When I first played Sonic Superstars back in 2023, I felt that it definitely stood among the greatest in the franchise, and that has actually been echoed by many other fans. From start to finish, each act is an absolute joy in the main story, and when revisiting via Time Attack, everything from the azure vistas and curved airborne boost platforms in Bridge Island, all the way up to my personal favourite, Act 2 of Egg Fortress, which is played completely in reverse. And hey, if you're an old school Sega fan and you're not grinning from ear to ear during the Fantasy Zone homage in Frozen Base Act 2, then I just don't know what to tell you. Of course, Sonic isn't just about running from point A to point B, and while I feel that is executed perfectly in this game, it's the other components where some cracks start to show. Okay, so there's the special stages. First we'll talk about the bonus stage, where you can earn more Sonic emblems, which is a homage to the special stages in the first Sonic the Hedgehog game, though they do have a bit of a Sonic 4 vibe about them. Still, they're fun and a cool throwback that can be accessed by hitting a checkpoint with 50 or more rings. The special stages, meanwhile, are a little bit weird. Accessed in the tried and true form of finding giant rings in the game world, you basically become a sort of space trapeze act, swinging from objects and chasing down a floating emerald. Blue spheres let you swing normally, and rings increase your timer, and boost pads send you rocketing forward. There's bombs too that will explode if you grapple with them for too long. I kinda hated these at first, but eventually, through learning the patterns and the emerald paths, they do become very enjoyable, and I even enjoyed jumping back into them once I'd collected the emeralds so that I could earn some more bonus tokens. When you collect a Chaos Emerald, you're given an Emerald Power, one of the key features of Sonic Superstars. Each time that you snatch one at the end of the special stage, you're taken to a tutorial that explains what it does and how to use it. The Emerald Powers give 7 different abilities. Avatar fills the screen with legions of doppelgangers that take out enemies. Bullet lets you point your character in any direction and fire them away. Vision gives the area a violet hue and uncovers secret areas. Water lets Sonic & Co swing upstream in waterfalls and other water bodies. Ivy creates a beanstalk that allows you to climb to higher places. Slow does basically what it says on the tin and slows the world down. The Grey Emerald differs depending who you're playing as, but mostly involves a new form of attack. And of course, if you get all 7, you unlock Super Sonic, or Super whoever you may be playing as at the time. The Emerald powers are a cool idea, but they're not very well executed. You occasionally get prompts where the ability is auto-equipped in its optimal use case scenario, and these work well. Otherwise though, it's awkward to cycle through the abilities until you get to the one that you need, and then you only have a short window to actually activate it. In most stages, unless prompted, I generally forgot about them, but they do come in very handy for bosses. Bosses! That's right, without a doubt the part of Superstars that has come under the most criticism in the community. Are they actually that bad? Well, there are 2 kinds. There's the giant animal robots, who aren't unlike the minor bosses in Sonic 3 and Knuckles or the Robot Masters in the 8-bit Sonic games. They are powered by giant versions of Sonic's animal friends, and they're pretty formidable. Like the rest of the game, Superstars does try to change things up a bit. The very first boss, for example, is just a chase sequence until it crashes itself into a falling cliff, which feels like the only time the series has done this aside from the race with Metal Sonic in Sonic CD. Meanwhile, the clown in Pinball Carnival tasks you with flipping over panels to make it vulnerable. Then you have the major bosses, the confrontations with Dr. Robotnik and Knack the Weasel. I'm sorry, I struggle to call them Eggman and Fang. These are, for the most part, battles akin to your usual Sonic game. However, most of them have multiple phases and transitions, which adds to the variety, but at the expense of the game's speed. Sonic games in the past let you hit Robotnik multiple times, sometimes even bouncing on his bald head for multiple hits. However, Superstars continues the series' move to make the bosses less, well, cheesable I guess. The enemies have a pattern, you follow it up, you hit and repeat, then they transition to a new form, attack or location, the pattern changes slightly, and then so on. This means that boss fights can really drag. What was a 20-second encounter in Sonic the Hedgehog 2 becomes a 3-minute war of attrition in Sonic Superstars. However, on repeat plays, the bosses really aren't that much worse than other Sonic games released post 1998. There are some good ones. Cyber Station, while long, is tense and epic. Press Factory's boss meanwhile feels more like the Sonic bosses of old, as you can vanquish this foe quickly if you nail the timing and use your emerald powers. And yes, this is where the emerald powers help in abundance. Using Avatar, Bullet, Slow and a few others can really give you the upper hand in boss battles and help speed them up. This is particularly true of the main story's final boss. This sprawling confrontation with Dr. Robotnik in yet another giant mech suit can feel cheap and overlong on its first playthrough. However, I found it much more bearable and, dare I say, enjoyable on subsequent playthroughs, particularly thanks to the emerald powers, though their utilisation is still not quite perfect. And it's the additions that give the game somewhat of a sour aftertaste. Did you know that the game can be played in up to 4-player co-op? Well, it can. The problem is that it's a bit of a mess. Sonic's playstyle doesn't lend itself to same-screen multiplayer in the same way that, say, New Super Mario Bros. Did, so most players will end up getting lost off-screen. Multiplayer and Emerald Powers were the two headline additions to Sonic Superstars, but one is awkwardly implemented and the other one is pretty broken. What else does Sonic Superstars add? Well, there's the battle mode, which is kind of fun, where you use robotic avatars to complete various missions, like an evolution of the competition mode in Sonic 2 and Sonic Mania. Like those games though, it's not something that will hold your attention for long. There is also a new character, Trip the Sungazer. She is something of this game's Knuckles in that she starts off as the island's guardian on the side of Dr. Robotnik and Knack, then switches to Sonic's side later on. When you beat the game on normal mode, you can play as her in the main story levels, but she also gets her own solo experience in Trip's story. This takes further inspiration from Sonic & Knuckles, as all the Dr. Robotnik bosses see him replaced with an egg robo. But that is far from the only change. Trip's story is the game's hard mode. Stages are redesigned for increased difficulty. More traps, more enemies and a ton of egg robos stand in your way. If you thought that the main story was a great Sonic platformer with some frustrating bosses, this mode reinforces both of those to the extreme. Trip as a character plays fantastically, especially with her double jump and her ability to roll on walls and the ceiling. The stages are challenging and can sometimes feel cheap, but when you learn them, coupled with Trip's new mechanics, they offer some of the most satisfying design in the series. There are videos of some Sonic players showing just how well these levels flow when they're used in the right hands. Unfortunately, the increased difficulty applies to the bosses too, to mixed results. Some gain additional attack patterns and decreased vulnerability windows. Some will actually still collapse to Trip's new moveset regardless. Others become additionally tedious and frustrating. The pterodactyl from Frozen Base caused me to have absolute fits with the additional hit points and attack patterns, while the stages auto-scroll with undulating platforms and conveyor belts make the battle an absolute chore. Why do we keep getting these auto-scroll bosses? Once again, did you learn nothing from Sonic Advance 2? Anyway, this is capped off with a final battle with Knack that takes the final Robotnik battle from the main story and amps up the frustration with new attacks and a lot more instant death. Oh, and it lasts about 5 minutes per try. Honestly, even with my prior knowledge, it took around half an hour to beat it. The undulating platforms mean that there's always a chance you'll get hit with this stupid net attack and suffer an instant death. Once again, the Emerald Powers are essential for defeating this monstrosity, but by no means do they make it a dead cert. Once you beat Knack, you get Trip's ending and that's it, right? Nope, then you get the last story, which isn't much of a story, just a cutscene and a boss fight. The story, or what amounts to one, is that a dragon appears for some reason. Apparently there's some foreshadowing during the game, but honestly, it does feel like it kinda comes from nowhere. What ensues is a supersonic boss fight that does go on for a little bit too long and throws some last minute BS your way at the end. It would leave a sour taste in your mouth, but then the ending and interactive credit sections go some way to bringing that smile back to your face. So where does that leave us? Sonic Superstars is an entry where the unambitious presentation masks perhaps the most ambitious classic title that we could have asked for. Sadly, it's what it brings to the table, tougher bosses, multiplayer and emerald powers, that brings the experience down a little bit. However, in spite of all of that, the core game is classic Sonic the Hedgehog at perhaps his very best. Even aside from the novelty additions, the zone design represents some of the most creative we have seen in the series since perhaps Sonic CD. Back on release, I absolutely fell in love with this game, and though the final 2 bosses sullied the experience to a degree, replaying it all over again has made me appreciate it even more. Sonic Superstars is a fantastic game in my humble opinion. It may not be perfect, but it has that classic Sonic the Hedgehog magic that is oh so important. Even after the main game is beaten, there's the time attack mode where you don't have to battle the bosses, making it a pure thrill to play, while earning extra coins has certainly kept me coming back to the main story. Even if the multiplayer isn't enough to keep you hooked, creating your own Cyberstation boss is incredibly fun. So if you haven't played this game already, make sure you do. Ignore the Superstars doomsayers and go in with an open mind, because if you loved classic Sonic, you will not be disappointed. If you've played Sonic Superstars, let us know what you think in the comments below. In my previous Sonic Mania video, I asked whether Sonic Superstars would address Mania's small flaws. I think it did, while introducing a lot of brand new flaws of its own. So next time I'll be putting Sonic Superstars and Sonic Mania head to head. Who will come out on top? Join me in the next video to find out, and until then, we will see you on the Sega side.